At this point, I have all 4 layers pinned together, about 4 inches apart the pins are. I have, of course, squared up the top and the backing fabric, and it's ready to be taken to the machine. That is my free motion foot that I will put on, and it does a really nice job for stippling a quilt top, in this case a Fauxdori. Now I'm bringing up the bobbin thread to the top, which is what you have to do when you're doing machine quilting. You have to get those threads to the top, pull them over to the side so they're out of the way. And you won't get that caught, and you won't have any problems, and you can finish it off at the end. Then I grab my quilter's gloves that have a grip, because that makes it much easier to hold on to your quilt when you're doing a project. Even something small like this, I like to use those. So here I'm doing a little bit of the stippling quilting over to the one side, and then I'm finishing up here. And then just cutting off those threads. I don't know, about 4, 5, 6 inches, I guess I cut those because I need to finish that off. Next, what I do is take those threads, I pull up the bobbin thread to the top, just like I did at the beginning. I take those 2 threads and put those on a needle and thread that with both threads together. And then what I do is bury that thread in between the layers. That way you don't have a knot and you don't really see that thread, and it doesn't come out. And I also did that to those 2 threads that you saw me at the beginning where I pulled up the bottom thread. And it works just really nice, and you don't have that extra knot there. And then I'm just cutting it off, and I'm good to go. Then I have actually squared up all 4 layers, and I'm ready for the binding. The binding's cut at 2 inches. I put 2 pieces at right angles, sewed it down corner to corner, cut off at a 1/4 of an inch seam, and then when you bring that up, see, you have a nice 2-inch long strip of fabric. Then I folded it in half and pressed it well, and then I want to show you where I put the seam and why I did that on a right angle, which made it a bias seam, because then it distributes that bulk down the length rather than having all that in one spot, and it makes for a much nicer finish on your project. So sewing the binding, I tried twice to show how I sewed on the binding, and both times, one time the camera flipped somehow and you couldn't see, and the second time it didn't work either. So the binding is sewed on here, and all I need to do is turn this over. I'm trying to do this one-handed, and then stitch it in place. And so I'm going to do that step next. See, and then you have the nice mitered corners here. I'm going to trim all these threads that have come loose, and I like the hand stitch. I know people turn this over and do what they call stitch in the ditch, and I've tried that, but I never am able to catch all the edges on the inside. So I'm definitely someone that does a lot of pinning, and then I finish it off with the hand sewing on in the end. So okay, I have this what I want to call it pinned. It's not really pinned. I have these little clips that I actually bought at a quilt store many years ago, but honestly these are just little hair clips. Let's see better over here. Little hair clips, but they work real well for basting a quilt. Everything is nice and neat, ready to miter these corners and hand stitch. So that's what I'm going to do, hand stitch around here. And then we will be ready for the spine. And see, it's still a little floppy like a quilt, even though it has it interfacing in there, but it's going to be real nice. And without planning, I have these birdhouses and birds pretty much in the center of the book, and this one here. So I'm real happy how that turned out. And I actually have one right in the back too. So I'm going to be real happy with this when it's finished. And I love the feel of the stippling. I am going to finish the stitching, and then I'll bring you back. Thanks.